This is the Youth Soccer Revolution Podcast, episode number 22. Thank you once again for joining me on the Youth Soccer Revolution Podcast. My name is Ernesto Diaz. I'll be your host. Today we have the pleasure of interviewing Brian Crookham. Brian is the Senior Director of Soccer Development for the Colorado Rapids, and really excited to get him on the show. He was recommended by a parent, and Brian was nice enough to take some time out of his busy schedule to join us right before the season started, so I was really glad that we were able to get him on. So before we get started, just want to mention a few things that we discussed with Brian while on the podcast. He discusses about being committed to the process, and that's something I've always been an advocate of with the kids and the parents that I work with. Just being committed to the process, not necessarily the outcome. And I think that's very, very important and critical for everyone to understand that you don't develop a child in a day. You don't do it in a week. You don't do it in a year. It just takes time. And I think we have to respect the process, respect nature, which is, that kids can't do very much when they're a very young age, and we have to let them grow, but yet keep teaching them the skills that they're going to need once they get older. So that was just one of the many things that we got out of the interview. I hope you enjoyed the interview. Again, Brian was nice enough to come and offer his professional opinion on the player development and definitely his academy and everything else they're working with the Colorado Rapids. So let's take a moment and thank our sponsors. MyTeamSpot.com. If you go to youthsoccerrevolution.com/MyTeamSpot, you can get a 60-day free trial. For my listeners, make sure you use the promo code YSE60. Again, YSE60. Definitely try them out. I've been using them now for about 4 months, and it's definitely something that I would recommend. Go ahead and try it out. 60 days free trial. I want to thank My Team Spot again for offering that to our listeners. And then I also want to thank Audible. If you go to youthsoccerrevolution.com/Audible, you can receive a free download once you sign up. So go ahead and definitely try that out as well. Again, a free download from youthsoccerrevolution.com/Audible. So here is Brian Crookham. Again, thank you so much, Brian, for coming on the show. Very much appreciated. First of all, Brian, thank you so much for being on here with us. I know we had a few hiccups with the scheduling, but really appreciate your time, and we look forward to hearing all about your program.
Excited to be a part of it.
So why don't we start out with you telling us a little bit more about yourself, something personal as well, so we can get to know you before we get going.
I think the question I probably get most is, how does a kid from Tulsa, Oklahoma end up in professional soccer? And it's probably very related to our conversation because, like most kids today, I started playing soccer at 6 or 7, and then something major happened in our market when the Tulsa Roughnecks of the NASL kind of came into our market and kind of gave us a model to aspire to, and so for me, the pathway in soccer started, I think, really intensely with that, and not only did we get to watch players in our market live, some of the best players in the world at the time as well, we also wanted to try to emulate those guys. I mean, I always wore number 12 for Billy Caskey, who played for the Roughnecks, and those guys were able to coach us, whether it was at clinics or in the clubs, and being a part of it. They settled in our area. I went to school with their kids, and we're friends, and I think providing that aspirational piece was important to me and others, and I talk about it all the time with Paul Bravo, who came out of the San Jose area in much the same way, and the Earthquakes provided that back in the NASL days there. So, for me, that's kind of the personal piece of the story, and how you get kind of that fire burning in you. And now, when you look at our country, where we've got 20 MLS markets, 24 USL Pro markets, I think we've got 11 NASL, all the PDL cities, and then you look at NWSL and W League cities on, when you look at the women's game, there's so much opportunity to connect with high level players, and so for me it was a very important piece, and I see that as a very important piece going forward. From my standpoint, I then went on to have a very nondescript playing career and spent more time with athletic trainers and surgeons than I did with coaches, I think, at times. But I knew I was going to be a coach. Started and coached 6 years at the high school level. At that time, also working as a director of coaching with a club in my community, where we implemented small-sided games for the first time in the late 80s and early 90s, and I think that was pretty influential in my thinking about how we should approach player development, youth development specifically, and so that was a big time for me. And I went on.
You said that was late 80s, early 90s?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and then from there I went on. I coached 9 years at the Division II level in college. Coached with the Olympic development programs, coaching ed for both the state and U.S. soccer, and then actually started with the Rapids from a media standpoint. Did some broadcasting, and then when MLS put a big push into creating youth development systems, I came on board full time with the Rapids in 2007.
And then, Brian, one of the reasons that I requested that you come on the show is one of the parents that's involved with the youth development or one of the soccer academies that I think Colorado Rapids is affiliated with, was very impressed with their system, and they just thought that we should get you on to kind of discuss it a little bit. So what can you tell me about the Colorado Rapids youth system? Why do we have a parent saying so many good things about it?
Well, I think for me, the first thing I do is maybe take the word youth development out of our system. It's a player development system. It's pretty inclusive, and we see our young pros as part of that development system as well. When we look at it in a very player-centric way. And then from there, I think we've kind of identified three main elements that we want to ensure are in place. And one of them is that pathway for players. So, can a 5-year-old, make it all the way to the professional team? Do they have the ability, the programming, those things in place from a pathway standpoint to get there? It also means that do we have alternate pathways where if they're maybe not as talented or maybe not as motivated, they can still continue to play? It's not just about the elite athlete in there. It's creating the pathways to continue to have players involved. The second piece of it would be the information that has to get to the players to make them better. Can we create a systematic program where, the building blocks for players get put in place? And whether you're an elite player or a very recreational-based player, you want to do two things. You want to enjoy the sport, and you want to progress at the same level that your peers are progressing. And your peers may be, playing once a week and enjoying it on the weekends. Your peers may be playing 5 days a week, 6 days a week, and aspire to be professionals. But if you enjoy it and you feel like you're progressing, there's a great chance that we're going to be able to retain that player. And so that's, kind of that information piece of it. And then the third piece of it for us is the delivery, the education system, which involves certainly the coaches, but it also involves the administrators, the parents, and everybody that has some kind of piece of development in there. So that's kind of the way we look at our system and kind of divide up the elements of that.
Yeah, one of the things that, many clubs do try to, when they put it on paper, it looks really good, and they want to go with it, and they want to make sure that it's implemented correctly. But it's difficult because you can put it all on paper, but then it's up to those coaches that are out there to ensure that gets implemented correctly. What's one of the ways that you ensure that it's being implemented correctly?
I think the first thing is that I and more specifically our program have the support of our ownership group, of our president. Our president, Tim Henschke, talks all the time about, fives to the first team, so we're all bought in. And I think that makes it a heck of a lot easier when you go out. You don't have to script these things. We can talk passionately about what we believe it takes to do this. And I think that helps us in the implementation. We also have experts in their fields that are working with this. We've got somebody specific specifically overseeing our development academy program. We've got somebody specifically overseeing our alliance programming and the clubs that are a part of that. And we've got somebody that's dedicated specifically to our youth club that's right here in the shadow of our stadium, and the implementation of curriculum and methods that are going with that. So I think we've been able to allocate resource to look at the detail that's going to go into that, and then from a holistic standpoint, be very consistent in the messaging that goes out.
Great. Brian, can you tell us a little bit more about the pyramid, the Colorado Rapids Soccer Academy pyramid you have on your website? I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we look at our programming in kind of phases, and as I just mentioned, we certainly have our first team and kind of that aspirational model at the very top, and then you look at the USL, the PDL, the women's programming that we're involved with, and then our local youth soccer club. Those are all kind of core pieces for us, things that we have. Certainly brand and kind of full identity and control over what we have. We also have a little bit more of our alliance programming where we've partnered with existing youth clubs to try to affect their model of player development and assist them with creating that environment out there. And so that's obviously a broader based piece of it. And we've got some community programs as well that we're involved in that affect even more players. And sometimes it's community based as far as community relations clinics, school clinics, those kinds of things. Sometimes it might be working in more of special needs areas and players that are a little bit differently abled in the way they approach the game. So I think we've tried to create a pyramid that's very inclusive, that creates pathways for all those players, and we currently have about 12,400 players that are affiliated with our badge within that system. Wow.
And over 12,000, is that, do you guys even keep tallies with other clubs? I mean, if other clubs have as many players in their system?
To be honest with you, we don't. We have plenty on our plate to deal with our own group, and that's one of the things that we say to our staff every day is that it's really important that we spend our time and energy focused on what we're fighting for, and not in any way about what we're fighting against. So it's all about us.
Yeah, and the question was just to try to get a perspective, because that sounds like a lot. So just trying to see what other teams are doing, but nothing that you've heard of.
No, there's not a blueprint in MLS, so teams are able to do it in the way that makes the most sense in their markets and for their programs. And I think if you looked at a Dallas, we may be a bit similar to what they're doing, but somebody like San Jose may have a different model, and Vancouver and Salt Lake, they've all got different pieces, and some of that's geography, some of that is the way their market is taken to soccer, or the club environment, or there's so many different things that you've got to take into consideration when you're dealing with the professional team in a soccer market, that everybody's kind of come about it different ways.
Yeah, and I'm just impressed that you're able to have that many kids in the system. And I think the better it is for all those kids that are closer to the Rapids and their professionalism, the better it is for all those kids involved with it. So that's good to hear. So you've talked a little bit about the academy system and your role, but tell us more about what you do on an everyday basis. What is your role in the youth development?
Well, I oversee directly all of our player development programming. So I oversee our development academy program falls under me. Our youth soccer club relationship in our market. So we have a youth soccer club that's with an after-school program that encompasses about 5,000 players in our local market. So kind of the relationship partnership that goes with that comes under our department in soccer development. All of our alliance clubs and all of our community programming also come within that. But also on the development piece, we look at the USL Pro piece as a very important part of our pyramid, and so I oversee that, as well as some of our international and domestic partnerships with international clubs and agents and things like that will help us from a development standpoint as well. So soccer development, which is the area I oversee, is a fairly large area for us.
Yeah, and you said it earlier. You said it's player development. I apologize. I've said youth development twice now, but
that's all right.
I completely understand player development system. So thank you. Tell me a little more about the Adidas Alliance partners. Tell me more about that program.
Yeah, so we've identified some people in some what I call remote areas, or not remote areas, but outside of our market that we've partnered with that have an interest in the way that we're doing things. So currently we're in the greater Charlotte area with the Carolina Rapids and kind of the northwest part of the Charlotte metro area. We're in Rapid City, South Dakota with the Black Hills Rapids, New Mexico with the Rio Rapids. We're also in Las Vegas with Downtown Las Vegas Soccer Club. And, you know, in all these cases, there's not really a set blueprint on how those clubs are put together and run from an administrative standpoint. They all started as nonprofit clubs like the typical club across the U.S. But what we have as a common thread is their commitment to creating an environment in which players can really reach their potential, whatever that may be. And I talked about it earlier, and it may be for the exceptionally skilled and motivated player, or it may be for the player that wants to come out once a week and enjoy the sport in their own way. Each of these clubs has demonstrated the want and the ability to create that environment for each player.
Okay, so just to make sure I understand it correctly, let's say you have Club X in Charlotte. They have a U14 age group, and you work with those teams, those coaches, the club, and then they have direct access to the U16, U18 Development Academy teams?
Yes. So what we do is we have an alliance director that specifically is on the phone on a daily basis, interacts on a daily basis. We have regular calls with our entire directors group across the alliance. We have a variety of delivery methods for our curriculum, for our educational pieces that go with parents and coaches and administrators. Some of that's through video, some of that is through, teleconference, and then we're in market with these teams multiple times a year to spend extended periods with each of those pieces of the club. So the players, the coaches, the parents, the administrators, in looking at any way that we can support the process for them. From an individual player standpoint, we've had players from our alliance clubs join us and in competition where they've joined us and gone around the world. Whether that be to Costa Rica, whether that be to an event in domestically, wherever that is, we've been able to include players from a lot of different markets. We've had some women's exclusive programming that's come to Denver that we've been a part of. So, we have interaction both here and in their home markets with the players that are involved. Okay,
and then the alliance partners, is that it's open to any club?
No, we've been very selective, and to be honest with you, we didn't necessarily intend to have 4 out-of-state partners. It just kind of aligned itself philosophically with what we've got. If you look at our group in Albuquerque and in Rio, the Rio Rapids, if you look at South Dakota, those are groups that can travel into our stadium on a weekend. They play a lot of games in the Denver metro area because of geography. And so, they've got a pretty specific tie to us, and they may be a little bit different than obviously the geography that goes with Carolina and some of the distance covered there. But we do have our USL Pro affiliate in that market. We just came back with our first team from Las Vegas, where we were able to play an exhibition game with our first team in preseason against San Jose, right in the middle of our Las Vegas club's big 500-team tournament that's there. So in every way, we've got a unique kind of connection to those clubs. And so it's not really an open process. It's not really a process that we want to expand. We don't intend to get any bigger. We don't have a goal to get any larger. We would never say never, but at this point, we've got people that are on board that believe in what we believe in and are able to execute on that. And so that's through a couple of different methods we've come across people that are like-minded, and we've been able to join forces.
Okay, well, I mean, that's too bad. I mean, for coaches listening to this, I'm sure there's some clubs out there that could always use your support, but I understand as well that you're limited to how much you can help with, and the kids that are in contact with you, you want to impact them as much as possible. So sure. That's obviously understandable.
Well, we're definitely open to assisting in the growth of the sport in any way we can. As far as deeming or going into depth, there's only so much that we can service because these are very, very tight relationships that we have with these clubs.
Yeah, good. And so that kind of leads us to the USL Pro. I mean, you mentioned a few times your affiliate, and speaking with Mike Jacobs just a few weeks ago, he discussed how excited he was about the USL Pro and the MLS affiliation. Can you tell us a little bit more where that process is?
Absolutely. I mean, this is a major step for us. We as a club have an ethos that believes in young players, and we've stockpiled young players on our first team roster. That is only good if you can continue the development of those players and expose them to meaningful minutes as they develop as well. We won a championship in 2010, and a lot of the pieces from that came from some successful years we had in the reserve league. Whether those players went on to play for us in the championship game, or whether those players were valued as players we moved on to acquire pieces that won us the championship, there was a major, major tie there. And with the demise of the reserve league, we really felt like this was an area we had to jump on and do well with. And now we've committed resources, we've committed staff, and so our goal is to help build an environment in Charlotte, where they can win a championship. They're running a pro franchise, and we need to assist them in getting to a level that excites the fan base in North Carolina and something they can be proud of. But we also want an environment where we can be successful at placing players there, getting them meaningful minutes, and having them come back to us ready to play first team minutes. And I think we've had some instances in the past that through injury or other circumstance late in a year, we've got guys that have played maybe 5 reserve games over the course of the year, and then they're placed in the middle of a game with a half an hour left to face Robbie Keane, Landon Donovan, and all of a sudden, that's a tough task for a player.
Mm-hmm.
If we get those players 25, 30 games before they're put in that situation, then I think we've got a lot better chance of helping them be successful. So we see this as a major, major piece of our development, and that's why we talk about, player development, not necessarily youth development. The young pros need that as well. So, this is a big piece for us. We've got a head coach in Mike Jeffries in Charlotte that we're very confident in, and as a matter of fact, as we wrap up preseason tomorrow here, I'll be in Charlotte for the foreseeable future and working with that group.
Let's transition over. Let's learn a little bit more about from your experience in working with kids and the player development that you've discussed. What do you think about players specializing in one sport?
I think specialization it's a tricky issue, and it's not a very well defined issue either. So I've got some mixed feelings on the topic in general. I think, for me, I dabbled in other sports. I think I was specialized because I never consistently played another sport. But at the time that I came out, the time, the effort, the commitment that you had to make in the sport, quite frankly, wasn't quite as structured and as intensive as it is today. And I think as we look at being specialists in development, and there's a lot of money and time put in right now, we've got to ensure that the holistic development of the player is kind of taken into consideration. So we've got to look at the calendar and make sure players are getting proper rest. We've got to make sure that they get good nutritional information. We've got to make sure that, at times they are, although it may be through the soccer program, getting non-sport specific physical development pieces in. So real movement training and things that make them a well-rounded athlete, that make them healthy physically, healthy psychologically. So I think there's a danger in specializing if it's not done well. And I think that's our goal. Is the reality is there are a lot of players that are going to specialize pretty early when they feel they've got a desire and maybe a talent level that they could progress, and their goal is to play at the professional level. Our job is to ensure that we continue to educate them as a well-rounded human, a well-rounded athlete as they go through that process, or else I think we actually limit their ability to succeed there.
Yeah, thank you. And what advice can you give parents or young coaches about player development?
Well, I think for parents or young coaches, I think the biggest thing is you've got to be committed to the process and not necessarily the outcome. If you're committed to the process, if every day is about trying to ensure that the player gets better and is in an environment where they can get better, then that natural talent, the natural motivation, and the player's willingness to get themselves down that pathway will determine where they end up. I think if you're only outcome-based, and especially short-term outcome-based, as in, I'm going to pick up my bag and leave if we don't win the game this weekend, I think that then puts a different priority in the way you look at it. And that's fine. There are people that are solely in sport, solely to win this weekend, and that's what sport is about. We're not saying winning is bad at all, but it has to become about winning through the process, not just coming to the outcome at all costs. And when we look at players that are 11, 12, 13 years old, they may only be 3, 4, 5 years into a process that's at the youth level, 10, 11 years long at the overall player development level, that could last into your 30s. So, are you bought into the process? And does Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday mean as much as Saturday in the way you go about your business there? So, that would be my advice, is to look at the process, be bought into the process, especially if you want to be part, or you want your child to be, or your player that you coach to be. You got to know where you are in the process and what it takes to be successful at that stage of the process.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Brian. I think the process, like you say, it's so difficult for people to grasp, because when they're 11, 12 years old, they already want to say, oh, this player is going to play and professionally, or this one is never going to make it. They're just barely getting started in their young process to be able to go through the player development. So, yeah, we definitely want to buy into that.
Well,
so thank you for that.
There is not one coach or one parent that can walk in and make a player a professional player. Everybody has the ability to limit a player from ever being a professional. If they don't enjoy it, if you get them to quit the sport, you can guarantee they won't be a professional, but you can never guarantee that they will. So you have to be bought into the process.
Yeah, great. There's another instance sometimes when parents come up to me and ask about a camp, and they'll say, hey, should my kid go to this camp? And, I always tell them, yeah, they can go to the camp, but what are they going to do afterwards? That camp is not going to make them a professional athlete. They're going to have to, whatever they learn there, they're going to have to get out of there and continue the process. Like you said, it's a process.
Absolutely.
Okay. And what is your vision for the future with player development? I know you've discussed a lot with the Adidas Alliance partners and the Academy. And what's your vision for the Colorado Rapids or U.S. as a whole?
Well, I think it has to be, we've just talked about it, it has to be a process. It's got to be, we've got to have clear pathways for players. We then have to have unbelievably detailed information that can be appropriately disseminated to the players, to the parents, to the coaches, to the administrators, to everybody that affects that. And I think, the more we see programs buy into a very holistic approach to development, the better chance we have of being really effective at developing, high-level players. Because if we skip steps in the way we put these building blocks together, it's going to crumble. But if you have a solid foundation and you go floor by floor in the way you approach, putting the pieces together in these players, then you have a chance. And once again, it's your limitations are the talent level and the motivation of the player to get there. Those are the big ones. But if we can limit the financial outlay, if we can be intelligent about the time commitment and be intelligent about the way we schedule players, those types of things, then I think all of that comes together to create an environment where players can reach their potential.
Yes, the environment so critical. And then, Brian, the question we ask every guest that comes on here, we want to learn again from your experience and your knowledge. So imagine you're 5 years old today and you have all the experience and knowledge that you have today. What would you do to become a better soccer player? Take us through the process that you would go through from 5 to 18 years old.
Okay. I think number one, I would need to be in an environment where I enjoy it. For me, as a 5-year-old, that means that I'm developing motor skills, I'm playing, I've got a ball at my feet, it's going to be a lot about me and the ball. I think as I progress, and it's going to be kind of where I am developmentally, it's not necessarily where everybody else is, then I can start not only enjoying it, but instead of motor skills, maybe focusing on soccer skills. Starting to understand how to manipulate the ball in a soccer manner. And then as I start to get that together, then we can worry about enjoying the game, but also understanding bits and pieces of the game, the simple parts and the decision-making pieces, and layering on that, as well as some of the competition piece, and learning how to compete, learning how to, then function in an environment that is competitive. And then enjoyment starts to come from winning, but that's at the very advanced. It's at the end of that spectrum there, So for me, making sure that enjoyment piece runs all the way through, and enjoyment means different things to different age groups and different maturity levels. But starting with motor skills, adding soccer-specific skills, adding the understanding into it and the competition piece of it, and then eventually learning how to win, because in the end, that'll be a big part of your enjoyment of it as well. But if we get those things out of order, I think I might be a pretty miserable 5-year-old.
Great, thank you. And then give us one piece of guidance, again, for players or parents who want to improve their player development or soccer development.
Well, I'm going to refer to a story and bore everybody with a story, but when Pablo Mastroeni, who's currently our head coach, was captain of our club, and it was actually just before we won an MLS Cup, he signed his last long contract with us. At the press conference, the thing that he said that struck me most was he said he was glad to have the contract negotiation behind him, because he could then get in his car in the morning and drive to work thinking about how he was going to be the best player on the field every single day. And that was his only concern. And I think, for somebody that wants to be a high level anything, whether it's an athlete, whether it's a performer, whether it's whatever you do in your day job, if you get up today and you say, you know what, today I'm going to be the absolute best I can. There's not going to be any slacking, and I'm going to be better than everybody else at work today, whether you're an athlete or not. And you do that consistently over days, months, years, then you get what Pablo got. You get World Cups. You get captaincy. You get to win an MLS Cup for your club and hold that trophy over your head. But at worst, you're going to maximize your potential if you've gone to do that every day, and you're going to see everything you could possibly see there. So I guess that's my suggestion, is that you approach every day with how am I going to be the best I can be today, given the circumstance that I'm in today.
Great, yeah. Well, Brian, again, thank you so much for coming on. Is there anything that I didn't ask that you think is important to discuss regarding the Colorado Rapids Academy?
No, I think we appreciate the opportunity to be in front of your audience and what you do for the sport and for the people involved in the sport, and just happy to have been involved.
Great, well, we really appreciate it. And then what is one way that we can reach you? I know we can go on the website for the Academy, and I'll put the link on there to reach you. Do you have a Twitter account that maybe people can follow you on?
I've got a Twitter account. I'm sure it's really intelligent all the time. But, it's at Brian Crookham. So just my name spelled out, BrianCrookham.
And there you have it, Brian Crookham. You can follow him on Twitter, and I'll have a link to everything that we mentioned in the podcast. But again, just want to thank Brian one more time. Just the knowledge that he gains from being around professionals every day. He mentioned Pablo Mastroeni. Definitely learned a lot from him. Just again, two quick things that stood out when he was talking about Coach Pablo Mastroeni going to be the best player that I can be today. And that's, at the end of the day, that's all we can ask from our kids, and we can be very proud of them when they do try their best. And if they leave it all on the field, they have no regrets. And we should be very encouraging of that, and obviously very proud every time they do try their hardest and do the best they can. You talked about buying into the process. Again, it's a process, and it's something that I've always advocated for. As I mentioned earlier, it's a long process, and it starts from when they can start walking, and it will end whenever they decide that they don't want to keep learning anymore. Because as Brian mentioned, as many of our guests have mentioned, who are quality coaches and players have reached a very high level, they tell us that they're still continuing to learn, and it's something that I'm obviously still doing. And I'll catch you guys on episode 22.